Mr. Resistance is sitting on your shoulder. Mr. Resistance loves it when you give up. And when you're tuning your banjo or your guitar, whatever, Mr. Resistance says, yeah, it's probably not going to ever get in tune. Why don't you just skip it and go have a piece of cake,
Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Keith Billick here with another episode of the Picky Fingers Banjo Podcast, the internet's #1 source for banjo nerd speak, banjo wisdom, banjo stories. So if that sounds like something that's up your alley, congratulations, you have come to the right place. And for those of you who are regular listeners and pay very close attention to my recording schedule and the publishing dates, I apologize that things have been slightly irregular lately. I am getting back on track, but I do have a good excuse. I was out of town for basically a few weeks. I was down in Raleigh, North Carolina for the International Bluegrass Music Association Conference, where I got to do plenty of interviews. I got a good handful that I'll be able to share with you over the next few months, and some very good ones, I might add. Also, the highlight of that week was getting to meet a bunch of you listeners. So anybody who I met down at IBMA, it was really great meeting you. Thanks for stopping by and introducing yourself. And always really cool to put names with faces and meet listeners and so forth. So that was a great time, but definitely overstimulating, a full week, action-packed. And then I went right from there, essentially, to the Great Lakes Music Camp, where I was teaching banjo, and once again got to meet some listeners in class and work with some of you on banjo skills and arranging some banjo music. So yeah, once again, great meeting you all. Got another interview there. So yeah, it was action-packed, and I will have lots to share with all of you from those journeys. But to my point, a little irregular getting these episodes out, so bear with me. I'm going to get back on track, and it will all be worthwhile. Now, I mentioned how much I enjoyed meeting up with podcast listeners, so definitely finding me in person is the best way to catch up with me. The second best way is to join one of our VIP, very important picker lounges. And what the VIP lounge is a monthly video meetup with myself and all your fellow listeners. I shouldn't say all of your fellow listeners. I said this is a VIP lounge. So in order to become a VIP subscriber, you have to go over to patreon.com/banjopodcast. And basically, for throwing me a couple bucks per month, you not only get to help keep the show running and support what I do, you also get to join those VIP lounges and all sorts of other rewards associated with signing up there on Patreon. Today we have an extra special Patreon subscriber to thank. That's Randy McKean. Randy, thank you so much for signing up on Patreon and supporting the show. I couldn't do it without people like you, and I truly appreciate you doing that. And maybe I will see you at this month's VIP Lounge, which has just been scheduled for October 27th. That is a Thursday evening. That's going to be 8 p.m. Eastern Time. We're going prime time, folks. So, once again, join the VIP Lounge by going over to patreon.com/banjopodcast. And I will hope to see you next Thursday. Other ways to support the show, if you're not into doing the Patreon thing, simply spread the word, either in person or on social media. Share links to the episodes, or if you want to purchase one of the world-famous Picky Fingers t-shirts, head over to banjopodcast.com. And those of you who already have those t-shirts, you know how good they are and how much it has increased not only your IQ and social status, it has brightened your smile, lowered your cholesterol, and, all for a very reasonable price. So banjopodcast.com is where you get those t-shirts and also podcast stickers, and that all goes to help support the show. Other than that, you can reach me by email, pickyfingersbanjopodcast@gmail.com. Always great to hear from you listeners with any of your suggestions, comments, feedback, etc. episode is a clawhammer episode featuring Michael J. Miles, and this was recorded back in June at the Midwest Banjo Camp. Michael Miles is one of the most virtuosic clawhammer players out there, not only in his just sheer ability on the instrument, but also his far-ranging influences and composing styles. He will perform anything from your typical fiddle tune arrangements to African music to Bach to classic rock, and also has a really impressive composing style in which you can hear all these influences come out through his own voice. So I had a great conversation with him about his background and stories and his approach to playing this music, so please give a warm Picky Fingers welcome to Michael J. Miles.
I am Michael Miles. I am from Chicago. How I became a banjo player is a really good question that I'm not exactly sure what the answer is. I started on the guitar like many.
Yeah.
I had a kind of a musical family, not professional, but we had a player piano in the basement, and my dad, he was a blue collar guy. He worked for the electric company, and he'd like to come home from work and he'd sit at the player piano and sing show tunes and stuff so
oh, cool.
As a kid, I'm upstairs trying to go to sleep, and he's down in the basement with his friends, and they're singing 76 trombones led the big parade. And that was fantasc, and
So you actually enjoyed that? It wasn't. It wasn't.
Yes, I did. And the player piano was a blast because you just pedal it, and there's all these rolls. We had old show tunes like Caledonia and
cool.
Somewhere Over the Rainbow and Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head, and those. I mean, a bunch of just songs that would, because my parents were kind of social my father died young, but he was a social guy. He liked to have friends, he liked to have parties, he liked to have people over, and singing was a part of, our world, and it's singing in the car, singing "Shine On Harvest Moon" and "Ragtime Cowboy Joe," and any kind of this is just like when singing was more of a kind of social activity of sorts.
And you were participating in that as well?
Yeah,
with the family singing and whatnot.
Yeah. And then I got a guitar, and I was because my older brother Terry, he played. He was a kind of a folky character. When he was there, he had a little folk group that was kind of like the Kingston Trio. This is in the '60s.
Yeah.
In high school, and there was a guitar around, and he showed me a few chords, and then. I remember I got in trouble once because my parents asked me to play a song for their bridge. They had these people coming over to play bridge. They come over to play bridge, and Mike, can you come out and play a song on your guitar? So I played because it had an E minor chord, and when you play the guitar, when you're starting to play the guitar, the coolest thing in the world is playing an E minor chord. It's 2 fingers.
Pretty
sounds
easy,
great,
right?
So I went out and I played "I Think We're Alone Now." I got in big trouble for that. My mother was aghast,
Wasn't what they were expecting, huh?
Yeah, no. But anyway, that was so. There was all this miscellaneous music around, and then I went to a all boys Catholic high school, and they didn't even have a music program. So I used to hitchhike down the Eisenhower Expressway in Chicago to get to school, and I really wasn't serious about music until I got into college, and it was there. I went for 1 year. I went to the University of Lancaster in England, and from that, I joined a street theater because I'm trying to answer your question about the banjo.
Yeah.
I joined a street theater that was based on the university that went on tour through southern France. So there were 9 of us in this street theater. We had 1 van, 1 big tent, and we were doing these shows in towns, population under 3,000 in southern France. and then at night we'd stay at these campgrounds. And at the campgrounds, you could get, if you brought the campground owner an empty bottle, he'd fill it with French wine for a quarter.
Oh, wow.
And so this was our entertainment, and we
was that a great deal, or does the 25 cents actually reflect the quality of the wine as well?
Probably both, but at age 21, you're not so critical. Boone's Farm is was on the menu in the recent past.
Yeah.
And anyway, so there we are, and I was playing the guitar, and I had a banjo. They had a banjo, and I was playing the banjo kind of like I would play the guitar. I could finger pick the guitar, so I was finger picking this banjo, and just we're doing a little. We had like a bluegrass thing with me hacking
as
away.
Part of the theater presentation.
Yeah. It was just one of the items. It was all mime and music and dance. No speaking. It was street theater stuff, and so.
Yeah.
So here, next to our little tent, next to our big tent, rather, there's a little tent, and where it's midnight one night, and we're drinking this wine, whatnot, and there's a little 2-person tent next to ours, and this guy sticks his head out, and he says, "Hey, you know this one?" And he plays on a banjo.
Wait, he had a banjo in his tent?
He had a banjo in his tent. Yeah. And he comes out and he knows.
And he wasn't with you or anything?
No, he was just happened to end up camping right next to us, and he knows everything I can think of. Can you play the Beverly Hillbillies? Can you play Deliverance? He's going, he plays them all.
Wow.
And then we were doing, we're doing these other songs and whatnot, and when we did other songs, he did something else. And he's sitting right to my right. And his banjo sound changed entirely. And I was just enchanted by the sound. I said, "What are you doing?"
Yeah.
He said, "It is frailing."
Oh.
I'd never seen it or heard it. And I was like, wow, listen to that. It's amazing. And I thought, no matter how much of this French wine we drink, I must remember that word.
Yeah.
Yeah. And a few weeks later, I was back in the United States, and I bought myself a Mel Bay book called "Teach Yourself to," or how to frail the 5-string.
So you had
banjo.
remembered through the fog of the wine and
and I got this book, and it took me a
year
year to figure out how to frail the banjo, and that was how I got started.
That's so funny that this American guy, leaves his country to find this instrument that's associated with American traditional music from some random French guy. That's really cool. So your interest in that obviously sustained. How did you take it from there and teach yourself, and what kind of music did you get into?
Well, having grown up in Chicago and having in my, I like to refer to our inner jukebox as my inner jukebox was from the radio, listen to the radio in Chicago, pop music, the Beatles and Rolling Stones, and I think we're alone now.
Read that too.
Stuff like that. And sure enough, started to experiment with what I could play. And at that time, too, this is like in the 70s. And so bands like the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, the Will the Circle Be Unbroken record came out in 1972. And the Kicking Mule had a record called Melodic Clawhammer Banjo that I picked up along the way. And I was listening to that. I'm friends with a lot of these guys now. John McEwen, who was the founder of the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, he recorded with Earl Scruggs that amazing version of Soldier's Joy, which mixed bluegrass and clawhammer style, and I must have listened to that 1,000 times, and then started weaving my way into that world of what people had done in American folk and traditional and roots music, and Doc Watson, and I loved listening to Doc Watson. And he had a record called Memories where he played a couple tunes on the banjo, but then he flat picked the guitar, and I felt like I learned a lot from just listening to how Doc Watson would handle melodies. And I would always have my students actually listen to. I said, "You want to learn how to handle a melody on the banjo? Listen to how Doc Watson plays it on his guitar. It's so musical, and
right.
And I found him to be a big influence as I was trying to get control of, in a sense of how to play traditional American music.
Yeah.
But my tastes went beyond just playing folk music into more popular stuff and into rock and roll songs and blues songs and anything that's you could make work.
Your inner jukebox, like you said, just anything of your influences that bubble out from that. Yeah.
And, and over the years, I've had tours to Africa, to Northern Africa, to Morocco a couple times, and the Middle East, to Turkey and Beirut. And whenever I would do this, I would always request that I could collaborate with local musicians. And I did so along the way. And there was quite a moving experience, similar in some ways to meeting the guy in France. Was in Morocco. I was taken to Essaouira, Morocco. That's a country, a city that's sort of in the south on the coast. And the guy who was taking me around said, you have to meet Zine Abidine. Right. Zine was the premier builder and player of the hajouj. And the hajouj is used in Gnawa music, Gnawa, Gnawa, Gnawa. And sometimes that's called trance music. You might have heard of trance music in Morocco, and where they would play this stuff and chant all night. And the main instrument is the hajouj. Now, the hajouj has a perfectly round neck, about 2 inches in diameter, perfectly round, as long as a banjo neck, maybe a little bit longer. And then the body is probably 2 feet long, 10 inches tall, with a leather top. So it's a drum-based string instrument.
I feel like I may have seen one of these.
And they have the back. The wood is beautifully carved wood. Like Moroccan art. Often they have mosaic and wood carvings, just like intense and dense and delicate and exquisite. Beyond words.
Yeah.
And Zine. So he bring me into his little shop, and here's and I have to speak to Zine through an interpreter.
Sure.
And there he is with his hajouj, which is pretty big. I mean, it's like bigger than a guitar when you hold the thing.
Okay.
And I'll send you a picture of it so you can
see
it.
I would love to see it.
And sure enough, here's Zine playing this, and there's 3 strings, and the strings are made of camel hair, and they're different length, and there's a short one in the middle, and there's no tuners on these. They're held. The strings are held in place by straps, because this is ancient. This is an ancient instrument.
Yeah. Wow.
I've asked about how old these traditions are, and I've heard everything from the 11th century is the oldest anyone ever said, down to the 15th century.
Okay.
This instrument and instruments like it, drum-based string instruments with strings of different lengths.
Yeah.
So here's Zine in his shop, and he's got the hajouj in his lap. And my friend, whose name is Abdel Krim asks Zine if he would play for me. And so Zine goes to play. And I'm looking at his right hand, and his right hand looks exactly like my right hand. Playing this downward attack on the strings that is AKA clawhammer banjo.
Right.
But
it's Zifreling.
But it dates to perhaps the 11th century.
Right.
And I have like chills just seeing this. Look at that. Like, here I am, a white guy who grew up in Chicago. I come to Africa, and I'm face to face with a guy who represents a music tradition that is hundreds of years old.
Hundreds of years
certainly
old,
much older than America. And his right hand technique is the right hand technique that I learned from the Mel Bay book. About how to frail the banjo. And I was, oh my God, I'm looking at this, and so
was that the first time that you realized that there was just a lot more to this than you had heard about, or?
Well, It was certainly the first time I was face to face with it.
Right.
You know, I mean, you know, you hear a lot of different things and you read miscellaneous bits and pieces and people tell you stories here and there, but here I am face to face with this
Sing
guy.
it for yourself.
You know? And he gestured for me to, if I wanted to play one of his instruments, to go ahead and do it. And I couldn't play it like him, but I could pick it up and make a sound out of it. And he's looking at me thinking, what is this? Who is this guy from Chicago? And he can pick up the ancient hajouj and play it. You know, it was like,
Right.
But nonetheless, he could see my right hand that looked like his right hand.
Yeah.
And it was like, how can this be? And it was like, oh my God. So we hit it off.
It's like two time travelers meeting each other somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
And
so he was kind of, you know, he was kind of freaked out from a completely different perspective. How can this be? That
Yeah.
here he is, literally he is known in that world as the premier builder and player. And
So this hajouj, he built that himself.
he built that, yes,
Oh,
right?
wow.
Yes,
Cool.
and he built me one. I have at home too.
Oh,
yeah,
how
yeah,
cool.
Yeah.
How are they tuned traditionally?
They're tuned root, octave, fourth.
okay.
So he actually pulled out a little tuner and showed me. So the lowest note is like a low D on the guitar if we're in drop D tuning, and then the next string in the
in
middle.
drop D, so like a very low
So very
D.
low
Okay,
D. Yeah. And the strings are big. They're like it's camel hair, but they're like the size of strings on an upright bass.
Oh, wow.
And so so it would be D,
Yeah.
and then an octave above it, so D above it, and then a G, a fourth above the D. And so a typical Gnawa ensemble would have one hajouj and maybe four guys playing these giant figure eight shaped iron castanets.
Oh, wow.
Really loud.
Oh, I can imagine.
And so you get these rhythms where they're and it's all syncopated. It's all and underneath that would be the hajouj, and you can't. There's not a lot of melody played on the hajouj. It's a bit more of a groove driver.
Yeah.
So there's like a bass line going boom, boom, and then there's call and response singing. Oftentimes it follows it.
I'm definitely going to have to track some of this down. I'm sure it's out
but
there.
And it is and it's a Berber culture. And so Abdel Karim, my friend Abdel Karim, we went and heard some other players, and it was clear to me that it was the music played on the hajouj was sacred, secular sacred, but sacred nonetheless. And so after I left and eventually got the one sent to me a few years later. And then I have this thing at home, and I'm trying to play. It's complicated to play, and I called up Abdel Karim and I said, "Okay, I got the hajouj, and I've been working on it." And Abdel Karim was a Berber, and he was a kind of a Renaissance man, and he seemed to know everybody, and he was a Moroccan who worked for the State Department, but he was also a writer and a poet and a painter, and had this kind of charisma that just it's like an air of charisma around him. And I called him and I said, Abdel Karim, I've got the hajouj and I'd like to begin using it, but I need your blessing I need you to okay what I'm playing, so I'm going to put the phone down and I'm going to play, and you're going to listen and tell me if it's okay.
Right,
He said, "What are you gonna?" I said, "You heard me. I need you to listen to what I'm doing and tell me." So I said, okay, And then so I put the phone down and I go to play whatever doodly doo that I had it on the hajouj, and then I pick up the phone and said, "So, what'd you think?" And he said, "Well, tell you the truth, sounds kind of Western to me."
That would make sense.
He said, "You should listen to those recordings we got for you." And I said, "Okay, I'll do that." And he said, "But you get special dispensation because you are a teacher, so you can play it like that.
Okay.
You have my blessing.
You got the blessing. Oh, that's great.
And so that, and which I think gave me along the way just this greater sense and permission to explore I see the banjo and clawhammer style as it's just a technique, and I am not a part of. I do play Doc Watson stuff. I love his work. And there's plenty of other parts of American traditional music of all sorts. I ran the Old Town School of Folk Music for 15 years, and I've done, so all that stuff is dear to my heart. But at the same time, I don't feel tied to any particular style. And,
Sure.
I started out with sing-along songs in the basement at home, and then got to playing, folky guitar and popular guitar, and I had a little electric rock band when I was in 7th and 8th grade and stuff, and then went on to got interested in classical music. I recorded the Bach cello suites. They were going to be an end for me for a while, but then I realized that they were not the end; they were the means to being more of a composer.
Folks, we are in a golden age of online instrument instruction, and at the top of that world is Peghead Nation. Peghead Nation has streaming video courses in banjo, guitar, mandolin, fiddle, dobro, upright bass, and ukulele, so you can learn bluegrass, old time, and plenty of other styles from some of the most talented players and instructors in all of roots music. Check out the courses they have, and this is just for banjo. You could get beginning or bluegrass banjo with Bill Evans, clawhammer banjo with Evie Layden, Wade Ward style banjo with Bruce Molsky, the banjo according to Danny Barnes, and contemporary bluegrass banjo with Wes Corbett. Each of those courses include high-quality video lessons, downloadable notation and tab, play-along tracks, and plenty of tunes and songs to play. And the best thing yet is you're going to get your first month free just by being a listener of this show. So go to pegheadnation.com and use promo code pickyfingers at checkout and claim your free month of the best instruction out there. And if you find yourself needing a banjo or accessories to get ready for those Peghead Nation courses, I highly recommend you check out Elderly Instruments, which is the world's most trusted source of new, used, and vintage stringed instruments, including banjos, guitars, violins, mandolins, ukuleles, all that stuff. They're going to have the best instruments you can find anywhere, and we're talking everything from the more affordable instruments for people starting out on up through the most highly sought-after vintage instruments. Elderly Instruments has been family-owned since 1972, and if you can't make it to their Lansing, Michigan showroom, you can see their full selection at elderly.com or give them a call at 517-372-7880 for some professional advice on all of your banjo and other stringed instrument needs. And you know what all these stringed instruments have in common? They all sound better with GHS strings. GHS Strings is another sponsor of the Picky Fingers Banjo Podcast, and I'm proud to say they have been made in Battle Creek, Michigan since 1974. And if you don't want to take my word for it, maybe you'll believe such people as J.D. Crowe, Sonny Osborne, and Bela Fleck, just a few of the many, many users of GHS Strings. So go check them out, ghsstrings.com. They have a wide selection of gauged sets so that no matter what you're looking for, you'll be able to find something there. I'm going to stop you because you're saying so much that I want to follow up on. I guess the first thing is you mentioned something a while back about teaching students about listening to Doc Watson and how he interprets a melody. Is there any sort of demonstration that you would, just a good example of a melody that you maybe learned in a way that you're trying to get students to take in from Doc Watson?
Sure. This weekend, let me see, I had to change the tuning, but this weekend I did Black Mountain Rag
sure.
as a workshop, And he plays that on that Memories record on the guitar. And it was one that I listened to him play it a million. He had on this record, I think on the same side was Black Mountain Rag and Salt Creek, those two. And I listened to them a lot. And I just had a sense of how can I take what he's doing and not, I couldn't play it exactly note for note, but I wanted to take this overall sense of it and get it into a playable format on the banjo, my style. So here's that.
Really cool, and something that comes to mind, especially when I hear some of your up the neck interpretations. You said that you view frailing and the clawhammer approach as merely a technique that you could use to play ostensibly just about anything. And I'm wondering, someone like me, and I imagine other people, view that technique as more limited than maybe other techniques. And it seems like maybe that either didn't occur to you, or maybe you saw it as a challenge to take something that is fundamentally kind of limited in the kinds of rhythms that you can do. And you've taken on a lot of like really ambitious challenges using that technique. So I don't know, just talk about your mindset of
I actually had a band, and I made my living as a bluegrass banjo player for about a year or so. I did both bluegrass and frailing in that band, but I couldn't bring myself to practice all those the bluegrass stuff because it didn't interest me enough, because it struck me there was a whole repertoire that if you're going to be a bluegrass banjo player, you kind of got to know Earl Scruggs. You need to do a certain, it's like a rite of passage that you have to go through. And it didn't interest me enough to put in the time required to do that, because my inner jukebox had other stuff in it that was, saying you should play this instead. And so I, to your question, found just the opposite, that in fact playing frailing clawhammer style, and I use those words synonymously, that gave me this freedom, it's like whatever song, what songs could I, we were listening to this band played Old and in the Way, and childhood living is easy to do. That's the beginning of, Wild Horses.
Right.
And it's like, well, man, I can do that because of what we're doing with frailing is rhythm and melody. And so, so when I play with bluegrass guys and I step into other kinds of musical styles, I've got a whole drum machine that they don't, because they have those finger picks on, and they're doing, and the limitation of doing backup, it doesn't get to include the kind of grooves that you can get with this. You can get all kinds of rhythms, and I used to, I'll listen to Indian tabla players and Puerto Rican djembe players or conga players and African djembe players, and these guys have all these rhythms, and I can listen to those rhythms and step into those worlds with the fact that we've got that right hand groove that
Right.
it's free, and basically there's no Earl Scruggs in that world where there's. I met Earl Scruggs, and cool. I listened and have enjoyed his work and totally respect it, and it was thrilling to see all that he did. But I felt like, okay, he did that, and there's a bunch of other guys who are doing that exact same thing, and that's fantastic, and so it's taken care of.
Yeah.
And there's this whole other world out there that musically where the doors are open.
Yeah, you kind of had a sense that there was more to maybe explore with this style. Or
I was free.
just called to you,
no expectations. If you say you're a bluegrass banjo player, show me. If you say you're, I play the banjo. What do you play? Well, what do you want to hear?
Yeah. But you still must have had an awareness. You alluded to your fascination with Bach, and we can absolutely start talking about that. But you still must have had an awareness that wasn't a place that people usually go playing clawhammer banjo.
Right. But
I'm aware of anyway.
Yeah. No, it wasn't. It didn't really bother me. My first recording was called Counterpoint, and it was folk songs, traditional music, Whiskey Before Breakfast, and The Wind That Shakes the Barley, and Red-Haired Boy, and Little Sadie, and some of those, kind of standard traditional tunes. Instead of just playing, it was called Counterpoint because I wrote a counterpoint harmony line for a second banjo, and I played two banjos. Because I was sort of fascinated by harmony. It's like, well, my observation was in traditional music, when there is a harmony, if somebody plays, you'll see harmony in bluegrass bands, and frequently those harmonies would be parallel harmonies.
Sure.
And so that are being done spontaneously. And counterpoint harmony is different because counterpoint harmony line has an independence and a different, doesn't necessarily have to have the same rhythm. Here's the melody line, here's a counterpoint line. You kind of construct them on paper. You write them.
They can exist independently.
Because they can, right. It's not something that you would necessarily, there's, musical brilliance galore, especially around here this weekend, but the counterpoint harmony lines they're generally more constructed on paper and then experimented with, and so that was something that really interested me, and that was taking that what can I do with traditional stuff, because the world doesn't need another recording of
Red
Whiskey
Haired Boy
Before
or something,
Breakfast. Like that's already been played a million ways. So what can I, if I wanted to record that, what would I do with it? And so that was where the harmony came in. That recording, that was the first one, and then the second one was where I got
Bach
onto
stuff, right?
Bach, and
Yeah.
Bach became like an addiction, where I've just played one, worked out one movement, and then another one, and another, and it was like I found that I couldn't play anything else but that for a while.
Well, talk about trying to tackle that on the instrument. Like I understand enjoying the music. That must have been quite a disciplined time for you to have to work all those out.
It was an interesting time for me personally. It was a tough time. I was working at the Old Town School at the time, and I was also in the middle of getting custody of my daughter. And so the world was like complicated outside there. It was complicated outside there, and I was like, how do I create? How do I manage all of the mess of the world and stay stable as a person?
Yeah.
Right. And so what happened was that was when I started leaning on Bach, and I would so outside this door, there's the world, and there's all this stuff that I'm having to tangle with, and some of it is kind of complicated,
Unpleasant,
and tricky.
yeah, right.
And there's some people out there who are not very nice, and they're and I'm having to go toe to toe with them, and I don't particularly like that. And then I come home, right, close the door, and go in this room, and play Bach. And here's I'm face to face with one of the wonders of the world, right here in this room, And out there, the world, it's complicated and messy, but right here, it's amazing. Amazing like I've never experienced before. And it was that was quite a powerful thing for me to lean on. And I think, there's a circle of the world that likes Bach and a circle of the world that likes a banjo. And where those two circles overlap, there's not a lot of people, But it was okay because, I had this job. I wasn't relying on gigs at that point because I was the program director at Old Town School. And so I was just, staying after this. And to me, it was being face to face with one of the wonders of the world.
Yeah.
Nothing.
I mean, I heard you messing around. Was that the cello prelude, the famous cello prelude? Are you up for giving us a sample of that to demonstrate how this could be interpreted? And you have a whole album of it, of course.
Yeah. Oops, I have to change the tuning again. Hold on.
Oh yeah, I already made you mess it up.
Okay. That's all right.
So cool. Thanks for sharing that. And I'll have listeners know you wouldn't have any way of knowing this otherwise, but the lights to the room went out for a minute there. So Mike was actually playing some of that in the pitch blackness. I think we're on like a motion sensor, and I had to wave my arms over here to get it to turn back on while you were playing.
Yeah.
So good job persevering. You've had all sorts of hiccups during your performances lately. Last night at the concert, your fifth string was coming out of the bridge.
Yeah, it came off on the other banjo. Yeah,
I'm starting to wonder if there's, I don't know, are you cursed for some reason?
No. You just you gotta be at the ready for whatever happens, and you never know.
You've proved yourself twice now, so I think whatever's cursing you can let up. Well, that's amazing, and I have to think that project had an influence on your own composing, because a lot of your pieces are not A part, B part, fiddle tunes, repeat. They are multi-movement suites often, and they're beautiful pieces of music. But is that true that Bach kind of led right into that style of composing?
Well, what happened was I worked the project. It was 7 years between Counterpoint and American Bach. It was a long time, and during that time, all these other things happened. But I was sort of zeroed in on these first and third cello suites, and so ultimately they were finally recorded, right? And I said to the engineer, "So what is our running time for both of them combined?" And he said, "It's 37 minutes." And I was like, "Wow, man. 7 years of work, and it's 37 minutes long." And at that point, 37 minutes would have been fine if it was LP, but CDs were, this was 1997, and or
need a little bit more.
Yeah. And it's like, and the engineer, without batting an eye, he said, "Well, you should just write your own suite." Now that, I just hadn't considered it, because I had been so locked on to just trying to learn Bach, and learning Bach is an ongoing process. There's a famous story about Rostropovich, the great cellist, who, Yo-Yo Ma at this point has recorded the cello suites 3 times. Rostropovich waited until he was 65, and they asked, "Well, Mr. Rostropovich, why did you wait so long to record the cello suites?" He said, "I've been practicing."
So it's not just you that have seen all their work.
So and when my engineer said, "Well, you should just write," I thought, wow. Well, I'm having these 2 suites recorded. I was liberated. That's when I began composition more in earnest at that point, and discovered that, in fact, Bach was not going to be the end for me, because, again, that circle of people who want to hear it is pretty small. Yeah. But rather the means to becoming a composer. And so all the riddles that I had to solve about how to play the banjo and how to play these melody lines that I had I transcribed, it went from the cello music, informal music notation, to banjo tablature, up an octave, and all the riddles that came with that I had to work out harmonically and physically. How can I play these and do it clawhammer style? Because clawhammer style this was what worked for me. And it was I had a lucky instinct about how to manage it, but in double C tuning, any given note, when you're above the G, at the 5th fret of the 1st string, you have 3 places to play it. You can play it there, you could play it on the 2nd string 2 frets up, or you could play it on the 5th string, and or you could play the harmonic on the 3rd string, and so those are options. Yeah. So that and having those options made it possible to work out the clawhammer nuance, to maintain, what felt right in my right hand. Yeah. But harmonically, and the idea how he created all that stuff, it really became the shoulders really of everything I've done since musically, and especially my original works.
Talk about your own composing style then. Like I noticed you even had a class this weekend about finding your voice through composition.
Yeah.
So maybe what would be like the elevator pitch for how people can find that kind of creativity, or how do you specifically do it?
Well, I think you find one of the people I talked about was one of my other musical heroes was Richard Rodgers, who wrote The Sound of Music.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's the one who wrote Doe, a deer, a female
Right.
deer, and My Favorite Things and and stuff. And I've taught songwriting and composition classes in universities and stuff. And there's a great book called Songwriters on Songwriting by Paul Zallo. Maybe some
cool.
of your listeners, and it's really interesting. Interviews with different songwriters mostly of the 20th century, and you know how they did what they did, and how and why they did it, and how it came about, and some were more articulate than others. It's but oftentimes the question, how did you write this song? And the response would be like, well, man, I don't know, man. I was just sitting there, man, and 5 minutes later, man, the song came out. I don't know how it happened. You know?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, that's real helpful. But Richard Rodgers, he wanted nothing of that. You see pictures of him, and he looks like a banker. You know, he kind of looks like a banker. He's got a suit and tie on, and carrying an attaché case and a
Little stuff here.
He one of his approaches to composition was to create a motif. And I've done this in some classes where it's like I could say to you, Keith, here's what you do. I need 3 notes. Find a note you like, find one to follow it, and find a third one. Those 3, and make a decision. Doesn't have to be perfect, but but the clock is ticking. You have 2 minutes. Give me 3 notes.
What's your 3 notes?
And then you come up with those are your 3 notes. And then you can so what can you do with it? So and what happens is the motif can become the beginning of a composition. And so I like that idea of, and I'll play a little how does this go? So here's one. This is the New Century Suite. I had a record, and the idea of my motif was trying to find not that a complete composition drops out of the sky, but an idea. So here's the idea. Whoops, sorry, not that. There it is. Sorry. And then, okay, well, record that. And that's it. Got to go. See ya. But tomorrow, I was like, what have I got? What have I got? And I go back to the recording. Here is my motif from yesterday. It took me 2 minutes to... And then to kind of start to expand on that.
Okay.
And some of the aids I used to like right now for the banjo players in the world, I like to use this 3-string capo. So the 3-string capo, I'm in double C tuning, and the 3-string capo is on the 4th fret on strings 2, 3, and 4. So it gives it kind of an E minor. So now the tuning open strings, G, and then the 4th string is E, B, E, D. So it's like an E minor 7 chord.
E minor 7,
yeah. And then that I like to think about B.B. King, who was famously did not read music, didn't play rhythm for anybody else. He just kind of knew where the sounds were, like where are the sounds. Uh-huh. And when he looked down at the neck, he could hear the sounds, and it's like so this new tuning. Okay. Yeah. Where are the sounds? So that was where this started, and I'll play this. This is a prelude to New Century Suite, yeah?
Yeah, I love that piece. It's great. And you literally wrote that just in the way that you described, a section at a time, taking
yes,
you can building on itself over time.
Yeah, so that there's that a section the So anyway, I'll answer your question. Yes, that there's those different sections in that piece,
of course,
and each one is like creating a theme. And what I like to share with the students about composition is that idea of like we can be so critical of ourselves, where everyone's their own worst critic. There's this great book called The Art of War, which is an ancient Chinese war philosophy. There's another book called The War of Art, written by this guy named Stephen Pressfield. I don't know if you ever heard of this book, but
I have actually. Yeah.
It's a very short book, and what he does is he personifies the naysayer. He calls the naysayer resistance. So like Mr. Resistance is sitting on your shoulder. And when you're, like having trouble tuning your banjo or your guitar, whatever, Mr. Naysayer says, yeah, it's probably not going to ever get in tune. Why don't you just skip it and go have a piece of cake, or you think, is this motif any good? And he's like, no, that's crappy. Why don't you just skip it, And Mr. Resistance loves it when you give up, And what I found was that personifying that voice in my own mind was really helpful, because it was like, okay, I can go toe to toe with this character,
Yeah.
and say, "No, man, I'm gonna get this thing in tune. I'm gonna fix this. I'm gonna, and it was because we all have this. It's just part of human nature.
Yeah.
So it was interesting to take that on and take how do we manage that inner critic and how do you produce results and it's like deadlines make the world go round. So I need another motif. You got that first one down? Good. Now I'll give you 5 minutes and let this one create a variation on the one that you started with.
Okay.
And there, you have some, not, Keith, it would be really great if you could play me a new composition, sometime tomorrow or something, it was like, and then it's like, oh, good grief, where do you, it's like, I don't know where to do, I don't know where to begin. Well, where you begin are these smaller ideas and then to let them grow. And the notion that, you play something and it sounds good. I think this is cool, and then I'll remember this tomorrow, right? And it's like tomorrow comes and you don't remember it. It's long gone, and it's it's important to kind of record things and get them down so you have some like a composition journal of sorts that could be just so easy to record stuff on your phone. You just do it. Boom. Here's like 30 seconds of this motif or another. So.
I think that's great advice. Yeah, producing another alter ego to combat the resistance guy. Who supports you and gives you your little assignments for the day or something like that. Well, we need to wrap up to get you to lunch and make sure you can move on with your day. Tell us real quick, like what banjo you play and give us the rundown of what we've been hearing.
This one that I've been playing, it's a White Lady, 1925. It was a tenor banjo originally, and then I had Tom Neckville build me a removable neck because I've traveled with it. Sometimes with my one-man show from Senegal, the Sigur, if I can drive to the gig, I have 10 instruments, including the hajouj.
Oh, wow.
But if I fly, I've flown with 5 or 6, so it's useful to have removable necks. So this one I use a lot, and then the other one that I have done quite a bit with is this fretless banjo.
Yeah, that's a beautiful banjo.
It's was made by Jim Hartel, minstrelbanjo.com, and has a whole other, soulful sound.
Yeah.
That's
very cool.
I often keep it in what is the equivalent of a double C orientation, but my low note, that's like the low G on a guitar.
Yeah.
So, and I can play a little. I got to run, keep from hiding, and I'm bound to keep on riding. I got one more, a silver dollar, but I'm not gonna let them catch me, no. Not gonna let them catch the midnight rider. I'm not gonna buy a point of care. Some old bed I'll soon be sharing. I got one more, a silver dollar, but I'm not gonna let them catch me, no. Not gonna let them catch the midnight rider.
Wow, yeah, what a great sound.
Yeah.
That's cool. Thanks for sharing that. You mentioned the the Minstrel Banjo's website. Tell us what your website is so we can track down your music and your tour.
Mine is milesmusic.org.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again for your time and the playing demonstrations. I wish I could dig more into your catalog with you and everything, but maybe some other time.
Yeah, sure.
I appreciate you meeting up with me.
Yeah, it's fun to talk about. Thank you for your curiosity, and thanks to your listeners for listening and playing banjos. Those who do, and so it's great to be able to share this stuff. That's so important, I think, to just share it. Here we have these,
of course,
great things to offer. So
we should try to expand that little section of Bach and banjo fans. So everyone out there, gather together. Here we go.
Yeah. All right.
Thanks again, Michael.
You bet.
That's going to do it for this episode, folks. Thanks for joining me. The song clips you heard in this episode were The Rumba from the Sundial Suite by Michael J. Miles, Soldier's Joy by the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, a track called Solo Gwembri by Abdelkabir Amlil, and I sincerely hope I pronounced that almost correctly. Whiskey Before Breakfast by Michael J. Miles. Thank you once again to Randy McKean, today's Patreon supporter of the show. Head over to patreon.com/banjopodcast to become a supporter of yourself and join me for this month's VIP Lounge, October 27th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. That's going to do it for me, folks. I'll see you all next time.